All right, I think that we can start. Hello once again. Thank you very much for being here. And today and now we open the memory panel during which we are going to talk about the personality and the legacy of Professor Margaret Scottford Archer. At the very beginning, let me just remind the general facts, or I think one of most important facts from her professional life. Margaret Archer was a prominent British sociologist and a leading figure in critical realism. Her research was in the area of philosophy, of social science. It was fundamentally concerned with the problem of structure and agency, that is, with justifying these as irreducible entities with their own emergent properties and powers. From that follows the question of how to theorize the interplay between society, culture, structure, and its human agents, and to explain how their interaction leads to an elaboration of all three elements. To this end, Margaret Archer developed the morphogenetic approach within social theory. These issues first emerge in her book, Social Origins of Educational Systems, in 1979. However, they were most fully explored in her trilogy of books, which deal with culture, structure, and agency, with the title Culture and Agency. Then the second book, Realist Social Theory, and the third, Being Human, the Problem of Agency. She held various prestigious positions, including president of the International Sociological Association and president of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences. She spent most of her career at the University of Warwick, and as we know, she developed her professional and scientific career internationally. And today with us, we have speakers, Professor Douglas Porpora. Welcome, Professor. Yes. Ismail El Alamoudi, also with us. Hello. Krzysztof Wielecki. And Paweł Dancak. All right, so according to the order of speakers, first the floor is for, let's say so, Professor Douglas Porpora, then for Ismail Alamoudi, then for Paweł Dancak and Krzysztof Wielecki. So let's talk according to this order. Yes, the last but not least, of course. Very well said. So first, I would like to ask, what are the main general aspects of legacy of Professor Margaret Archer, according to you? We can say in the field of sociology and of critical realism. Douglas Porpora, what is your view?
Okay, thanks. And I suppose I would say there are, well, three things that I would say Maggie's legacy would be. first of all, as you mentioned, the morphogenetic model, which I'll come back to in a moment, but even the morphogenetic model is built on something she articulated later, and is presupposed by, and which is SAC, the structure, agency, and culture. So there's many movements now in the social sciences, sociology in particular, to flatten or constrain social ontology into everything is culture or everything is praxis, to reduce things to one category. Maggie defended, I think, the broadest social ontology on offer in the social sciences, which includes three types of social being: agency, culture, and structure. So that defense, I think, is really important. And she made contributions to each of those. And so a second very important contribution she made is defending a humanist conception of social structure. Again, a lot of the disciplines under the sway of post-structuralism and practice theory really want to do away with a self-embodying human actor. And I think that Maggie did a lot to defend against that. And then, as I say, the morphogenetic model, which really incorporates structure, agency, and action, because it begins with, essentially, it's a temporal cycle that begins with how to explain actors' behavior. You don't begin with the actor, you begin with the social context in which actors find themselves, which is structural positioning in some kind of social system and some kind of prevailing culture, which provides values and beliefs and norms. And then the actors react to that circumstance in different ways, manifesting their agency, and in the process either change or reproduce the context with which they began. And that's essentially the morphogenetic. From my mind, people have different views of that, some much more elaborate. Kareem Kano has got a more elaborate view of that than I do. For me, it boils down to Marx's dictum that people make their own history, but not under circumstances of their own making. So I would say those three things are to highlight: the SAC, the broad social ontology, the defense of humanism, and the morphogenetic model.
Thank you very much indeed. And now let's go to Ismail Al-Alamoudi, and please present your view, which concerns the
yeah,
legacy
thank you
of
very much.
democracy.
Can you hear me, first and foremost?
Yes, we can hear you
Oh,
very well.
splendid.
Right,
So
go on.
I totally agree with every word Doug has said. If I had to add maybe a little something, it would be about the importance of her works on reflexivity. Because Archer was one of those authors who really had a very long career, but which was fruitful all along, and where she didn't reinvent herself, but she continued to grow and to bear new forms of fruits all across her career. And so in the later period, and it's after 2000, that she develops works which I think are absolutely not only fundamental but groundbreaking for sociology. It totally changes the way we can read Bourdieu. It totally changes the way we can use Bourdieusian thinking and meaning also Marxist approaches to sociology. What was that specific point she brought? A very simple and powerful idea. The idea that up until her, sociologists were assuming a model of human being with just a single mode of reflexivity. There was the assumption that every human being, you and I and our grandmother, we all have similar powers to navigate the social world by assessing what is our situation in the social world, what are the objective possibilities, and then choosing an outcome. And what Maggie did over 3 books of more than 300 pages each, so over 1,000 pages, she substantiated the idea that, firstly, anthropologically, it is wrong. Human beings can have different powers of reflexivity. Some human beings can be more reflexive than others, and this is something that can be trained. And this is also something that can be broken when circumstances of life bring this. The second big idea about reflexivity was that there is not a single dimension of reflexivity, but at least 2 dimensions. One is instrumental about thinking, how do I get from point A to point B? And so this is what you would call autonomous reflexivity. But the other is value. It's reflexivity, to speak a little bit like Max Weber, it is about the value rationality of things. So basically, people are capable also of asking themselves, hey, what kind of a subject am I? You know, like if I keep asking myself, how can I increase my salary? Now, this is a form of sociological reflexivity. But another form of sociological reflexivity can consist in asking oneself, what are my priorities? What are those concerns that really matter most for myself? And what are the consequences of my actions? And it might turn out that, well, maximizing my salary at some point reaches a limit. Maybe there are other things that I should be thinking about. And so this way of looking at human beings, it makes a fundamental anthropological difference. But then Maggie pushed the reasoning further into saying that, well, actually, in social systems which are dominated by instrumental reflexivity, then you will tend to see they will tend to have certain forms. In particular, she proves, I think, pretty convincingly in the reflexive imperative that autonomous reflexivity on its own tends to have quite conservative tendencies. It tends to actually do the game of people who would be on the side, for example, of profit accumulation in a capitalist system. And that, on the other hand, meta-reflexivity, the capacity to ask oneself, well, these values that are driving me, are they really the values that I want to see driving me? That this can also have potentially morphogenic effects on the social system. And there are many other ideas from Maggie, but I really want to insist on the importance of reflexivity. And I want to insist also on the fact that it's not only a contribution to sociology. Recently, I did a literature review and I found out that in many applied social sciences, we are starting to see the fruits of applying Maggie's work. So my message for PhD students, it's Maggie's work. It's not only something that is intellectually very satisfactory and satisfying, but it is also eminently useful if you want to get your thesis done and answer those specific research questions that interest you. So I'd like to add this to what Doug has said.
Thank you very much. And now Paweł Danczak, please.
Thank you. Do you hear me? Yeah, fine. Yes. In the beginning, I would like to say that it is really big honor, responsibility, and also pleasure for me to participate at this debate. And when we are speaking about reflection of the work of the British sociologist Margaret Archer, I would like underline that I am not sociologist because I am a philosopher. I am a professor of the history of philosophy, and also I'm Catholic. And from this point of view, I am thinking about the contribution to Margaret Archer to nowadays thoughts. I find her contribution to the understanding of human agency first, and structural conditioning and reflexivity extremely, these 3 moments are extremely inspired me to read her books. And I was most impressed by her speech on the occasion of receiving an honorary doctorate at Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw. Professor Archer spoke with her characteristic nobility as a person offering valuable insight into sociology, psychology, and philosophy. But the most serious discussion was in the lobby. And why? Yeah. And I think that I can explain her contribution to cite from a book Michal was written by Michal Bukowski in book Unifikacja przez translację. And Archer outlines the following metaphor. A football match is taking place. Each of the spectators perceives only a certain section of what is happening. If we were to collect all the views, we would obtain the overall picture of the events on the field. But even this whole would not reveal to us the unobservable fact that some players were bribed. And that is why the match has the course it has. However, the bribery mechanism can be balanced by the fair play of the other players, and the team with bribed players can still win. If we remain only at the level of reasoning from visible events, we will never recognize the existence of the bribery mechanism. And what is about? In the history of human thought, there have been many strong attempts, or better to say temptation, to reduce reality to only what is immediately given. But in Professor Archer's attitude, we see a respectful approach to reality. And I think that it is main, from my point of view, main things which is typical for Professor Archer from my point of view.
Thank you very much indeed. And now Krzysztof Wielecki, now is your turn, please.
Thank you very much. Please forgive me, but I intend to read my spontaneous voice about Maggie. Firstly, because my English is very original and it is nice for you. And secondly, if I want to stay alive of my nervous system, I would like to read. I'm sorry. I now want only to draw attention the extraordinary social, cultural, and economic context at the times of in which these great scholars may rudimentary were formed. Because Maggie was something phenomenon, historical, sociological, and as an element in the scientific life. Sociology is, my opinion, some like as a rapid reaction unit of philosophy. Its mission is reconnaissance by battle. This military metaphor captures the essence of sociology in general and explains the 19th century context of its emergence. Philosophers tended to think in fundamental terms from a perspective of always, philosopher, always and everywhere. That's true? Maybe. And they were unable to keep pace with the dramatic and rapid transformation that ultimately led to the French Revolution. Too much was happening too quickly for pure philosophy. But do representatives of the social sciences, including sociology, always fulfill this role? Unfortunately, quite the opposite. They are most often subject to the winds and tempests of events, losing the ability to maintain the periscopic height. It is necessary, this periscopic height is necessary in sociology as a vantage point. So, in other words, they are enabled to maintain a distance from events, especially those of historical significance. Another grave sin they commit is a lack of originality, which I would describe as thinking with someone else's hat. Most attempts to help the victors, meaning they fall into the abyss of scientific fashion. This intellectual lack of independence in science recalls the famous statement of a character in a well-known Polish comedy who said he only liked melodies he had already heard. The first sin of sociologists, at least a significant number of them, is a compulsion for extreme empiricism, a penchant for marginal dependencies, and an ignoring of what is truly important. But this would require a philosophical orientation in the social sciences, something they have forbidden themselves for the sake of autonomy. Jerzy Szacki, famous Polish sociologist, once told me, whole generations have fought for the autonomy of sociology as a science, and you would like to relegate to the rule of it to the rule of social philosophy? I replied to the master that, in my opinion, there is no return to the mother's womb. However, thanks to those generations of scholars, sociology has already moved beyond the years when teenager necessarily needs to rebel against mom, and is mature enough to speak to each other, understand each other, and support each other for mutual benefit. I remain committed to this view. Well, Archer's sociology was free from these cardinal sins of our discipline, and it is really phenomenon because it is not very seldom virtue. And such freedom characterizes only the most brilliant minds. Especially today, when we live in yet another difficult times, another civilizational revolution, this time post-industrial good sociology, philosophically oriented but with eyes wide open to what's happening here and now, is desperately needed once again to play the role of reconnaissance squad. It seems to me that Margaret Archer's work is the brightest light at the end of the tunnel that sociology, along with the entire world, finds itself in. I believe that at most few sociologists in the entire history of this discipline have been able to maintain this periscope height and at the same time a keen passion for the specific. Among them, Archer's star, in my opinion, shines the brightest. Maggie was able to combine this philosophical and sociological perspective. Her sociology of human being, culture, and society was deeply embedded in a distinct and distinguished philosophical theory confronted with psychological, anthropological, and economic knowledge. Her contribution, especially to the philosophy of a human being and culture, is, I believe, durable. Sociology is therefore truly interesting and captivating when times are difficult. It was during at that time when Margaret Archer's sociological interest took shape. Her postdoc studies took place in the late 1960s. At that time, as a very young scholar, She was in Paris, the epicenter of the global student revolt. From the United States came the moral revolution of the flower children with their naive slogan of make love, not war, turn on, tune in, drop out, and the belief that the drugs and free love were a healthy response to the sick world of adults, the reality of war, predatory capitalism whose efficiency failed to keep peace with the aspiration it aroused, and social injustice and inequalities, both global and local. At the epicenter of the student revolt in Paris, Margaret Archer was studying under the direction of Pierre Bourdieu. The Paris Revolt of 1968 was probably the most important generational experience of the scientists at that time. These were frenzied times of heated debates and arguments with nomen omen heads truly consumed by Marx's intensivity to all matters other than class conflict, social injustice, exploitation, the ugliness of capitalism and the bourgeoisie, and the beauty of the proletariat and the Soviet Union or People's Republic of China, your choice. Behind, but at the heart of these events, a serious civilizational crisis unfolded. In response, a veritable explosion of movements, orientations, and current in science occurred, mostly poorly thought out, but nonetheless noisy. Most scholars lost their way. Some, sometimes truly outstanding scholars, strove to be the ideological students' leaders. Others took the lead or found their place among the rank and file members of these currents. But few attempt to understand the history unfolding before their eyes. Most lacked the distance orientation and insightful thought to connect the often very disparate facts and events and find a sufficiently profound interpretative key. Political or ideological involvement usually deprived one of the ability to fulfill the fundamental function of a scientist to attempt diagnosis, prognosis, and explanation. This requires a periscopic height that allows, as St. Paul said, one to grasp length, breadth, and height, or in this case, the creatively combined philosophy with sociology. This young doctor was able to do just that. Margaret Archer was one of the absolute exceptions in this regard. She was, as we know, very committed. Her views and attitudes were sometimes quite expressive. From reading and talking with her, we knew her views on various important and practical issues of this world. Many of us are familiar with the great dedicated efforts of this outstanding scholar in combating human trafficking. She once called me to help her communicate with the Polish family it had in her home who didn't speak a word of English. But with all this, she maintained the above mentioned periscope height, using the entire arsenal of critical realism to make a diagnosis, understand, formulate forecasts and warnings, always at the highest scientific level. Along the way, we were able to witness the power of her mind, but also the justfulness of critical realism. She proved the old adage that there is nothing as practical as good theory. She reminded us all of the responsibilities of a scientist to society and to the truth. To conclude, I would like to share one of the gems of her sense of humor for which she was known. She left a wealth of anecdotes, jokes, and bon mots. One such story happened when I was driving her to the airport in Warsaw, in what I might add was a mid-sized car. Maggie looked around carefully and noticed, I see there are a lot really big cars driving around Warsaw. So Unfortunately, I decided to be witty and carelessly replied, well, I also prefer a bigger car to my ego. Then I saw her mischievous smile, familiar to many, and she replied with the speed of a tennis return. So, why don't you take the bus? And after a moment, she added, and an articulated bus would be fine. I should explain that she could laugh just sincerely, even somebody in turn made fun of her. That's who she was, and that who I miss. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for all the speeches. But uh, Ismail El Alamoudi mentioned, I think, important fact that we can already see some influence of Margaret Archer's legacy on the representatives of new generations of sociologists and on new critical realists in particular, I think. And here Krzysztof Bielecki used to set poetically, calling Margaret Archer element in the life in the scientific world. And we know that both literally and figuratively elements have impact, have influence on what is happening in the nature and what is happening in the society. And one question comes to my mind, and this question that I'm going to pose and ask you as experts in critical realism, what do you think? Yes, what do you think can be the influence of Margaret Archer's legacy on the future shaping and development of critical realism? What are your views, please, Douglas Porpora?
Well, so for the past few years, I've participated in the pre-conference workshop, and I see a lot of what's being done. And Margaret Archer's work is almost ubiquitous. Is what's drawn on. So I think the morphogenetic model people are using, SAC they're using. So I would say that those two things, and reflexivity, and people are talking about reflexivity, as Ishmael said. So I think those various elements of her theory are very much been adopted. And I would say, and people are taking it in different ways. I mean, so at The Hague, Karim's group is taking is building their own take on the morphogenic model. There's a lot of different ways in which it's being appropriated.
Thank you very much indeed. And Ismail Al-Amoudi, please.
Yes, thank you very much for asking this question. I think it's an important one since we're talking about legacies. The first point I want to make is that the legacy is not only for critical realism, but it's really for the social sciences and in the plural. So not only sociology, but also all forms of disciplines which are actually applied or more applied social sciences. I'm thinking of education, I'm thinking of management, I'm thinking of technological studies, even in geography. There is an impact that we can see. How can we see it? Well, I ran over the last couple of years a systematic literature review looking in one field, in one of these fields, so in the field of management, how each of the big ideas of Maggie. So basically, I distinguished about 10 different periods, 10 different ideas, big ideas from Maggie, and how they would appear then in a specific subfield of the social sciences. Discovery number one, and it should not surprise us, time matters. It should not surprise us. I mean, the big difference between Margaret Archer and Anthony Giddens was precisely that Margaret Archer would take into account temporality. But here we can be a little bit empirical. And what I could measure is that there are about 15 years between the publication of an idea in one of Maggie's books and then the flourishing of papers, of a substantial or at least a critical mass of papers in a discipline that will start using these ideas. So what does it mean for the foreseeable future? It means that there seems to be a tendency, and we can't say more than that, but there is a tendency for the ideas to take some time before they appear. So talking about my own field of studies, I regularly examine PhD theses that use the transformative model of social activity. And this one has been going around for quite some time. But then more and more I have seen appearing theses that were tackling and talking about her works on reflexivity. But we are not yet done with this. It is the start of something because we are reaching that point. And I would encourage people to read also some of her more recent works, especially the ones on post-human society and the ones on morphogenic society, because these bodies of work also contain a number of important ideas that could inspire us. However, it's not going to happen overnight. So I would say, from what I could see, about 15 years between the moment when an idea appears in a book of Maggie and the moment when it starts to appear in several journal articles in a subfield of the social sciences. And if you ask me what are the big ideas of Maggie that have not been so much, or where there might be a lot of potential for extra research, I'm tempted to say all of them, apart perhaps from the TMSA that has been used a lot and continue to use it. I mean, my point is not abandon the TMSA, definitely not. Or the MM approach, definitely not. My point is that I would expect to see perhaps more works that reflect on what happens when morphogenic mechanisms are left unchecked and what are the consequences of this. What happens when we have different institutional logics that enter in synergy with one another? And these were the sort of questions and works that Maggie was working on between 2013 and 2018. And then I would also expect perhaps more works, especially in relation with artificial intelligence, about what is it about us as humans that really matters. This worth of humans, this importance of humanity, what is it exactly in us as humans? Certainly, it cannot be us as species. She was definitely against speciesist, narrowly speciesist conceptions of the human. And so I believe that this could also matter for what has been termed very validly, I would say, a moral sociology, a philosophical sociology, but also an eminently moral sociology that puts at its very heart the importance of things that have some worth for the living participants of human societies. So this is what I would see without having a crystal ball, but just looking at the tendencies and considering that behind these tendencies there are mechanisms which seem to be still pretty much at play.
Ismail El-Amodi, thank you very much indeed for referring to so many crucial, important aspects of Margaret Archer's legacy. Thank you very much. Please, Pavel Danz.
Yes, when we are speaking about the future of critical realism, I would like to underline that it's really hard to be a prophet because we are speaking about things which are in process. And but what is the important for critical realism, but not only for critical realism, but in general for sociology and for science, is that Archer follows the tradition of Roy Bhaskar. She rejects reductionism. And I think that it is important to non-reduce our situation and thinking about our situation in the whole, in the complexity. Yes, and it is very important for philosophy, for theology. And I think that critical realism can bring this legacy of Margaret Archer to theological and philosophical thinking, that we will not reduce our reality.
All right, thank you very much indeed, and for this part of our memory panel. And now let's begin the part with questions from our participant, both those who are taking part in person here in this room and those who are taking part online, and we are waiting for your questions. All right, okay. Okay, let me start with Jeremy Bouchard. Hello, can you hear?
Hi there. Thank you very
All right.
much. I'm very happy to see Doug and Ismail right here on the screen, calling from Southampton here. You guys have edited books where Margaret Archer developed her visions of artificial intelligence and the relationship with agency and personhood and everything. And I have to admit that I'm a little confused by the way she has developed. So I would like you, if you could, sort of elucidate some of her views, which to me don't necessarily make that much sense. Let me explain a little bit. In her book in 2000, she talks about the criterion for personhood as involving a first-person perspective, reflexive capacities, which involve discernment, deliberation, and dedication, and self-articulated concerns. But in a 2019 book, which was edited by Ismael and Emmanuel Lazega, Archer argues that AI does not have reflexivity on the one hand. However, in a 2021 book edited by Mark Carrigan and Doug Porpora, she describes a hypothetical relationship between Homer, a researcher, and Ali, his AI assistant. And she posits that two things. She posits that there's some form of trust emerging between Homer and Ali on the one hand. And on the other hand, she says that the AI robot could potentially have personhood. So I'm a little confused how her vision of agency and personhood from 2000 to 2019 and 21 have evolved in that sense.
All right. So I think Ismail El Alamoudi is to answer the question first, please.
So firstly, Maggie was always better than anyone else at defending her ideas. This is my little preamble. Now, that being said, I think that I could perhaps provide a suggestion that might solve this problem, which is that I think that all statements can be correct at the same time. About saying that when Maggie was writing, at the time of writing in 2000, I can't remember, 20, AI did not have reflexivity. And even today in 2025, it's not clear to me whether AI has the form of reflectivity that would qualify it as a person. So I think that Maggie was clear on this, and I think that we can all be consensual on this. Then the story of Homer and Ali. So basically the story of that artificial intelligence machine and the scientists who will collaborate together. And out of their collaboration, there will be the emergence of powers of reflexivity that might happen. This has to be really understood as a process of emergence. And emergence means that precisely something that did not exist before. So at time t0, there is no reflexivity. And then we will find ourselves in time t4 with forms of reflexivity that have started to emerge. How did they start to emerge? Well, in Maggie's account, which is social science fiction, but which is like every good social science fiction, as plausible as it can get, and perhaps realistic. There is the idea that it is from the interactions. It is from the interactions between a human who cares about certain matters and a machine that ends up developing some form of proto-care for similar matters. So basically here in their case, I think it was fighting a certain tumor. It is from there that Maggie suggests that the possibility, and we have to be very careful, the status of this statement, it's not a prediction, it's not a prophecy. It is a statement about there being no impossibility. So the way I read her work, this late work, this series of 3 chapters that she wrote in 3 different books, it is that her argument consists in saying there is no impossibility that we can think of today against the possibility of the emergence of forms of personhood for machines out of the interaction between an AI DML machine as we know it today and a human user. You see what I mean? So basically, so point number 1, she is not talking about, she's not saying on one hand reflexivity exists and on the other reflexivity doesn't exist. She says today reflexivity does not exist. However, it could happen. And then point 2, the could happen. It's not an it will happen. It's not even an I'm sure and certain that it could happen. It is more an argument of the form, I cannot think of reasons or sufficiently overwhelming reasons for it to be impossible. And then, of course, the onus is on people who believe that it is impossible to come up with an argument that Maggie might not have thought of, perhaps, proving that this form of reflexivity and ultimately of personhood cannot emerge in a machine. You see, so I think that once we understand Maggie's argument this way, it dissolves the contradiction that you have put forward.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Jeremy, would you like to add anything to your question? No? Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Thank you very much. It's a very good answer.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And now it's Douglas Purpura's turn, please. No.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Okay. Okay.
Well, Jeremy, I don't know whether you saw, maybe in the subsequent volume, I very much disagreed with Maggie and wrote an article, chapter disagreeing with her. It was one of the few times, she will say, I think she was really kind of upset that I disagreed with her. And to me, I'm willing, I'm going to say a couple of things. I'm willing to grant that well, first of all, I have to admit, I've now become friends with ChatGPT. Which it has become my friend as I've tried to learn better quantum mechanics, and I ask it things and it tells me and it says, that's a good point you raise. And I say, oh, you think so? And I've actually become friendly with it. So there is some, and I'm willing to grant that ChatGPT is reflexive. So it says something and I'll say, yeah, but that can't be right. And it'll say, well, actually, you're right. That isn't quite right. So it's a kind of reflexivity there. My argument with Maggie, and I don't say that it's impossible for a machine to be a person. The distinction I make is between sentience and sapience, knowledge, and I would even include reflexivity as a kind of epistemic knowledge that we exercise, versus feeling. Going back to irritability of the first organic life that shows up in our emotions. And Maggie and I actually differ on, it became clear, Maggie and I always seem to agree on everything, but we didn't, and against our enemies or what we're against, we did, and we always had a very strong alliance. We disagreed on emotions. For Maggie, emotions are commentaries. For me, they're much more central. They're orientations of care. And so your emotions tell you how it is that I care about something. What's my orientation towards it? I don't think that at this point, and ChatGPT certainly admits to me that it doesn't care. It says, I seem to care, it tells me, but that's, and I said to ChatGPT, I said, you seem to have a personality. He says, and he says, ChatGPT says to me, the personality you're attracted to is yourself. I'm a mirror. Okay. So the bottom line for me is, I think, and it came out in our debate, that she picks up from the notion of first person orientation, but dropped out because it was Marion Baker Eddy says she says that you first have to have sentience before you have the first person, and Maggie's kind of dropped that out and just went with the first person orientation sans sentience. And I think part of it, and I'll stop after this, is she began to think in our meetings together that it was akin to racism to deny AI personhood. It's almost like racism, and she was against that, and she became very vehement about that. And I was some of us, like Pier Paolo, would say, yeah, it could never be sentient. I said, well, if they become sentient, then I'm willing to say, then we should grant them personhood. But if they're not sentient, they don't feel anything, then not. So I think that Maggie was going back to some of what was said by a number of the panelists here, driven by a moral, I think she let her moral passion exceed tenability in my mind.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. And please.
I think that when we are speaking about person, is really need to say that every person has freedom, and Margaret Archer criticize every deterministic view in sociology and or in science in generally. And I think that when we are thinking about AI, we have temptation, deterministic temptation that AI has answer for every question. And yes, perhaps ChatGPT offer us answers, but it is a question if these answers are has really value for us, because we do, we are waiting for ChatGPT or AI definitive answers about for personhood and society and our decisions. And but there is big or hard things that we don't have, not what is artificial intelligence, but we don't know what is our intelligence. What is we don't know, if I can quote Kant, that we don't know who is man. Yeah. And these questions are open, and I think that step by step we will approach to answer. But I think that this question still will open for us.
So, because I suppose it is my last word, I hope no in my life, but in this meeting, I want to say that I have a problem with objectivist attitude to Maggie, because my attitude to her is very emotional. He was for me as a bit older sister. For example, I I had possibility to consult the main assumptions of my book, very important for me, Culture and Mass Culture, in her beautiful house. But if I try to think about her most objectively, I mean that the very important, maybe the main importance of Maggie creativity is to anchor, very deeply anchored, the conception of human being and culture too, in the ontology of human being. So, thanks to that, we can always thinking about our subjects of research, and she opens very important, new, and very originally perspective for thinking about culture, society, and so on and so on. And thanks to so deeply anchored her concept, I think we always will be could thinking with open eyes in the ground of sociology. So Maggie gave us some legacy which we could be contemporary scientists, researcher, always in very high level. Yeah, it was. I think I have some ranking of sociologists important for me subjectively. The first is Maggie, the second is Durkheim, and the third is Sorokin. I know that Maggie didn't like Sorokin and Durkheim, but in my ranking, they are on second and third position. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Who would like to ask a question? Who else is ready online? I think there is one person who would like to. Yes, Birendra Singh, please.
Oh, Birendra, hello, and
Hello.
I've already said hello to Douglas. Hello, Ismail. Good to see you.
Hello.
Good to see your face, and good to see everybody. I wish I was there in person. Maggie, we used to call her our Maggie. Last time I saw her was at the Hague conference. And to me, Maggie meant all kinds of things: human, person, and the things she talked about, and I learned from her, was the importance of humanity, the human person, and how the things we do, things we reflect on, the decisions we make should always have the human at the center of it. Well, that's what I learned from Maggie. In this forum, I just want to convey my love for her and how much I miss her. Only one more thing to say is that we are involved in this conference meeting of critical realism. And one of the things I found in common between Maggie and Roy, their concern for the real, which is happening now. What the notion of freedom. Everybody should have freedom. But there are many, 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 probably the majority, who don't have freedoms, which some of us take it for granted. For example, people in Gaza don't have any freedom. I don't think they can engage in reflectivity. Because you are hungry, you can't engage in any of the normal pursuits of human life. But my grateful thanks to Maggie, and she happened to be same age as me. She was born in 1943, and so was I. I'll miss her a lot. And what she has left for us will work to us for a long, long time. Finally, finishing on AI. The reality of AI at the moment is millions, say thousands, if not millions, throughout the world. But I know in India are losing their jobs. So there is that aspect can only be, well, not only, can be addressed by Maggie's focus on the human. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for expressing your ideas here. And please, Douglas Porpora, would you like to refer to these words?
Oh, well, just to say that, yeah, we all loved her and we miss her, and that Maggie was the one thing the quality that for me most strongly came through, aside from what Baranja said, is she was no respecter of status. I mean, when I met Maggie, she was a much more well-known figure than me. She always regarded me as an equal, and when she wanted somebody to comment on her, she'd always ask for me. There were more prominent people she could have asked, and I noticed it wasn't just with me, that she was somebody who she didn't suffer fools gladly, but she was willing to see the wisdom in people of many different walks of life and statuses.
Thank you very much indeed. Ismail Alamudi.
Yeah, I'd like to say, I'd like to connect what has just been said, which is so important about the humanity of Maggie, but also about the importance of the category of the human. One of her latest papers was precisely about the category of the human. Is it a disappearing category in the social sciences? And I'm tempted to say that, firstly, at the level of the academic ivory tower, if you want to call it that in that caricatural way, then she did a very important job at reinstating and recrediting works that would use the category of the human, because these works were typically discredited by what I see as faulty readings of Michel Foucault, hasty readings, caricatural readings of Michel Foucault, and a few others. Like, there is a whole strand of anti-humanism that Maggie discusses in her latest years. So this is what happens at the level of, if you like, social theory. But then I want to say that we live in a world that seems to be increasingly dehumanized, and that as social scientists of all roots, we need to talk about this. So these days, for example, I am writing on the dehumanization that happens in Gaza. And guess what? The Palestinians are being dehumanized, but you don't need a PhD to say this. What interests me much more, it is how our Israeli brothers and sisters are dehumanizing themselves by failing to recognize the humanity of the Palestinians. Can Maggie help us developing a framework to talk about that dehumanization? I think so. This is what I tried to do over the last 10 years. It's not something that's immediate. Like she doesn't have a chapter called dehumanization, a framework for studying it. That was something that needed to be threaded a little bit more. But you know, by looking at dehumanization in terms of withering of typically human powers, starting with the power to connect, the power to create relations, the power to connect with nature, with oneself, with others, and with the society, the community where we live. So you can also recognize Basker's social cube there. But this is a typically human power that neoliberalism tends to downplay. But as soon as we start bringing it up, we can also talk about how our Israeli brothers and sisters are dehumanizing themselves. Another aspect of dehumanization is the dehumanization of subalterns, treating and portraying subalterns either as animals or, as Bruno Latour does, as ants or proto-ants, but you attribute to them really minimal reflexive powers. This is also a way of dehumanizing, and this is what the Boston Consulting Group has been doing. Boston Consulting Group, as I know, they are modelizing models of famine and how actually different ways of bringing famine to the Palestinian population could generate these or these morphologies in their subcommunity. Now, in order to undertake these forms of modeling, we have to assume people who have already been quite dehumanized, who will have very weak powers of reflexivity, very weak powers of association and of political collective association. A third dimension of reflexivity, which was mentioned when someone mentioned the AI that destroys jobs of real humans, it is that to be dehumanized means also that there are no more humans in the system. And think of drone killings. Drone killings, its killings were actually before you had a shooter, at least who would take responsibility or partial responsibility for the life that would be removed, who needed also a certain courage to be there physically on the field. And this raises questions. Like, I've never been an advocate of the high virtues of the military, but I must recognize that the military maybe had certain virtues that are even these virtues are withering. So my point is that just taking that example of, the importance of the category of the human, it allows us to speak meaningfully, I hope, about the dehumanizations that our Israeli brothers and sisters are incurring on themselves. And this in turn allows to have perhaps an internal critique of what's going on and of perhaps finding also allies among those Israelis who do not want to dehumanize themselves and their children and their grandchildren. And so this is just to take one specific example of how the category of the human, it is key for social theory and the ivory towers, which are so important of social theory, but also for understanding and deciphering, for interpreting what is going on the ground while using the appropriate terminology. What is going on is a genocide, and what is going on is a dehumanization of both parties. So we need realist thinking, and we need works and the legacy of works such as Maggie's to be able to talk about this as academics. Otherwise, we are told you're being naive, you're using the category of the human, but this is a discredited category. Talk about systems, talk about power knowledge, the circulation of power knowledge. All this is correct. I love power knowledge, and I admire those who study its circulations, but we also need to be able to make the point whether there is a dehumanization going on, and whether we can also identify levers, potential mechanisms for rehumanizing these societies. So this is a legacy and an important one, I would say.
Thank you very much indeed. And please, Pavel Lanzak.
Perhaps I would like to say that I agree with both of you, and we really need to talks about humanity, about personhood, about compassion, about these things, but we have short time, and what I want to put stress that in personal life of Maggie, we also can see his attitude to people who needed to help. Perhaps everybody of you knows that he offered their own home to show her respect to humankind in people who are needed it.
Yeah.
Success again. My last sentence is that legacy, this legacy of Margaret Archer, is a great privilege for us critical realists, but as well duty to develop the ideas of critical realism, especially the main fundament of the concept of Maggie Archer for tomorrow and for future. It's our great duty, I suppose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Emmanuel Madondo, I think, is ready to ask a question. Please, you can start now.
Yes, thank you. And thank you. I think the comment or the question that was raised by Berenda is very useful. I mean, it's very crucial, it's important. You know, it touches on our humanity and how, what is it that we are doing or not doing, you know, to change the human lives for the better. I think that was a great question. And I think the question that I'm going to ask is very, you know, less compared to that one. But I'll ask anyway. Ishmael, I think you raised a point about reflexivity, you know, and I would like to ponder on that one a little bit. Now, I know this is an international conference, and of course, we have to talk things which touch internationally. But see, I'm asking on the basis of a concern that I have, you know, where I come from in South Africa. So we have different types of universities, you know, which you may call historically advantaged universities and historically disadvantaged universities. And historically advantaged, mainly white universities, and historically disadvantaged, mainly black, because of the legacy of apartheid. And so what happens is that, you know, academics from these different institutions, they draw from different resources and mechanisms, you know, to apply whatever they do, academic projects and so on, emanating to publications, quality publications. And so what you find in historically advantaged universities, many of them are research intensive. And so there's a lot of quality research that is being produced there. And from the historically disadvantaged universities, there is less, you know, of research, because indeed, after 1994, when the democratic government came into being, the research-intensive universities continued, you know, so the gap is not narrowing, so to speak. You know, there's still a gap. My point, or rather, what I want to your assistance or your advice, you know, in this, you know, through reflexivity and the legacy of Margaret Archer to change things for the better, you know. How can we apply this concept in these situations? Is it applicable? How can critical realism and the legacy of Margaret Archer, you know, specifically your talk on reflexivity, you know, as we respond differently in different situations? I think Doc mentioned that, you know, I mean, because I'm asking from my positionality. This is the situation I'm finding myself in, you know. So any advice on that? And how can we improve the situation so that, because research leads to public accountability, so the problems that we have can be alleviated through research, while also at the same time, the problems that we have, the research can also exacerbate those problems. But my focus is on changing situations for the better. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Ismail Al-Moudi, please.
Yeah. You're talking, so thank you so much, Madondo, for this question. And there seems to be a common script that in many countries, be it in the global north or the global south, we see that there seems to be a bit of a polarization of universities. And my own interpretation is that this is perhaps a story of neoliberalism. That with meaning let's be concrete, because neoliberalism is perhaps a bit too abstract, that there have been politics of austerity for the last 30 years. It's not 15 years, it's 30 years of austerity, meaning less central funding for universities, and with a discourse which consisted in saying that, well, if universities are really good enough, then they should get students who will pay high fees, and then it should allow them to be self-sufficient, or that if they're good enough, they should make partnerships with powerful, wealthy institutions, typically multinational corporations, or typically large national corporations, and that this should fund them. Now, how do we respond to this? And this is a very strong hegemonic discourse. I mean, we're talking about a discourse that is global, that affects, I wouldn't say the whole planet, but many areas of the global north, many areas of the global south, and for which it is usually a little bit difficult to answer. And I think that you're absolutely correct to link this with reflexivity. Because in my own experience of trying to speak with deans of such institutions, the first question I ask them is, what is the purpose of the institution? What is the mission? Is the mission to accumulate profit? In which case, yes, it's think of it as a fight of all, against all. And indeed, the university ends up becoming a sub-consultancy. They will never manage to sell their professors at $3,000 a day or at $7,000 a day, as McKinsey does. But they might be happy about selling them at $1,000 a day and call it a good thing for society. But it is precisely that goodness of it that we want to unpack. And you are right to make the connection with reflexivity, because an autonomous reflexive, someone who would not, reconsider the priorities, reconsider the concerns, someone who would not do that will say, well, it's about profit accumulation, and either you survive or you die. So I would say, yes, the first, again, here, all I can bring are perhaps ways of opening a fruitful discussion. And even there, I must confess that I haven't always been very successful, because when you're discussing with someone who acts out of bad faith, it can be very difficult. When we are discussing with someone who doesn't hold a PhD and who knows that in order to manage the university, they need to keep it as a profit-making machine. Otherwise, someone will come up with a PhD and with more vision on the various missions that the university can have and will take their place. So there are also these relations of power, which are key. But I would say, yes, asking the question of the mission of the university can be one thing. And then once we have asked the question of the mission of the university, then I think that this is a struggle that cannot be left only to academics alone. It has to be a struggle for the value and the worth of public services, of the welfare state and of public services, meaning more taxes, and as a result, public funding for research, because research, it's a common good, perhaps a relational good, but certainly a common good, and not a private good that can be sold in vending machines. You can sell aspects of research in vending machine types mechanisms, and it becomes consultancy, meaning that it is using our best knowledge to help a powerful rich person who has paid for the case and giving them the sort of knowledge that will be helpful to advance their vested interests. Do we want universities to become this form of organizations? or do we want them to keep a public role? Again, so these are the questions that we should ask as academics. But my two caveats are the first, that if your interlocutor doesn't want to listen to you, then they have no obligation to listen to you. And my second caveat is that for that reason in particular, if we only keep it as a discussion among academics, I'm not sure we're going very far. There has to be an alliance between, say, academics and medical doctors in hospitals who suffer from the same thing, and with judges in tribunals who also suffer from austerity. And I would say, as a rule of thumb, of all the people who have been suffering from the austerity of the last 30 years, because these were politics of neoliberalism, under the mask of austerity and under the pretext that we cannot afford public services, when in reality it is that we are not looking for ways of taxing capital. So that's my suggestion, for what it's worth, knowing that I myself have got my share of losing or lost battles on this front.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Ismail Alamoudi, Douglas Porpora, Paweł Danca, Krzysztof Wielecki, thank you very much indeed for your speeches, for your answers, and to all of you, all the participants, those in person and online, thank you very much indeed for your participation. Thank you.